Okay, hello friends, and welcome to our sort of new format here on Kirby Russia. Our topic for the day is who are the Russians and why that's our topic and all that. We're going to get to that. This is long form. You know, guys, first off, thank you for the something like 8 or 10,000 people that are subscribed to us on YouTube, which I think there's also about 10,300 or some at the moment here on Telegram. Unfortunately, people kind of go and they come, so unfortunately the Telegram algorithm has become very brutal. But anyways, there's a pretty significant number of you guys, and I'm happy you're here. And one thing I promised you guys when I kind of took August as I took like 2 weeks off, which is a rare thing, like my first vacation in a lot of years. I also went and played a lot of American football. We won the minor league championship, so August was kind of a dead time for this channel. Also, my dear friends, Russian friends who like to hook me up with the occasional donation, kind of were also not around for summer. So I kind of took that as a hint to chill out and rethink things. As you can see, we have some new graphics. Actually, they're new graphics from an old project that died, but I wanted to kind of change the visual up just a little bit. You know, it's kind of a similar background. But what I really wanted to do today was try out like doing a real live stream to YouTube, Rumble, and Telegram. And the signal went, and it seems like at least on Rumble it appeared. On YouTube it didn't, which is weird because YouTube's usually the easiest one. And on Telegram it appeared, but I couldn't see any of you guys here. I couldn't see your like chat messages, and that kind of defeats the point of having a stream, because in theory, if I turn this on thing, you can see this thing. So there should actually be the option to have like people's chat messages and stuff come up, and I should have been able to see at least something, but it didn't work. So I'm not really quite sure what to do about that. So anyways, this is kind of the new season, the new philosophy of Kirby Russia here. But the main thing I just want to tell you before we get to our topic, who are the Russians, and again, why we're talking about that today at this moment in my personal history, is because I think that on this channel I've tried a bunch of stuff, and I'll tell you one thing. It's hard to do something you don't like. Donations are cool, but they're not like a salary. And to be honest, I don't really like doing, like, I see people who are like Alex Christoforou does a great job from the Duran of doing this whole like daily news things. That Polish lady Anya does fantastic coverage of the news. So does our friend Mike Jones. And I keep kind of being inspired by people like that to try to maybe do something that's more newsy with this channel. But until I have like a paid producer to organize all that, I kind of actually get a lot more excited about the ideas behind the news and sort of, you know, analyzing what's happening more so than doing like the daily news grind, I guess. So that's why I think that from now on, first off, we're going to stick to long format content, which are basically either going to, hopefully, if I can fix the technical difficulties, are either going to be true live streams, where it's just going to be a live stream, and then it's going to be on YouTube, Rumble, and wherever, boom, it's done. Or it's going to be something like this, where it's going to Telegram, but I'm also recording it. And I'm recording it on my own, because the Telegram recordings are a little poopy. If you guys watch these, are fans of my live streams, you'll notice that the quality is not super great with the way Telegram records it. So we're not doing that today. We're recording to the hard drive, and in fact, hopefully it is recording. But we'll see, I guess. The computer says it is. So anyways, that's kind of the plan for the Kirby Russia universe. It's going to be all long format live streams. Maybe focused on 1 or 2 topics per live stream, then taking calls. I think that format is what interests you guys the most. It is kind of what interests me the most. Again, you can't do something you don't super like. Obviously, talking about political views is awesome, but like, I don't know, it's just not as enjoyable to try to make like some sort of spicy video with a spicy title and like get something really intense in 3 minutes, or especially do stuff like YouTube shorts, which are just the gutter of YouTube entertainment. Nah, guys, I think it's the opposite. We got to take a page out of Mr. Carlson, or heck, even Mr. Rogan's playbook there, and just let this thing go. So hopefully in the future, in fact, I might be able to do some interviews in a more live format too. I think that might be a little bit more exciting. In the past, some of our guests have been too scared to do that, but I can be a very convincing individual. So, anyways, our topic for today is going to be, who are the Russians? Now, I was invited to Orenburg, Russia, to actually speak on this topic on behalf of RT. And I don't know if I've ever been drunk enough on this channel to leak some certain insider baseball, but I can tell you that that is a definite change in attitude towards me from the RT universe. So I much appreciate that. So I was expecting to go to Orenburg, represent the RT universe, and in English to why Orenburg? Because there's the a youth BRICS forum. So a big BRICS forum where they had, like 500 or whatever people, I guess, judging by their faces, aged 16 to maybe 23, from all over the world, the human rainbow that we hear so much about, from the BRICS countries anyways, to talk to them and answer the question of who are the Russians. And there were a few other people on the panel. One guy I know is pretty cool. He is a Dutch blogger. One guy was like an Armenian who does some sort of Russian cultural something or other in Armenia. And the other guy I can't really remember. But anyways, unfortunately, I kind of got a weird surprise. Maybe they got scared because Big Papa Tim, my overall thesis of this question that I sent to them in advance because they were curious what I had to say, and in some ways they were a little bit stunned because, if people don't know who you are, remember the Russian stereotype of a Western foreign person is massive clown, wimp, and so I think they were expecting something to be very flowery and full of rainbows and unicorns. Your standard thing of like, Russian women are the most beautiful in the world. And that's one thing they definitely expect you to say. And then you have to say something about the Russian people about how, there's the skromny, which is meek, one of those English words that doesn't come up in English very much, or words in English that doesn't come up very much, that the Russian is meek, and that Russians are patient. That's a stereotype they have of themselves. Basically, they kind of want you to come up there and confirm their view of themselves. But the old man, you know me, the old man who lives in the world, oh boy, I can't speak today. The old man who lives in the woods, who is talking to you because he can't sleep, not because he can't speak, he doesn't play that game. And so I kind of wrote what I was going to say, which I'm going to tell you very soon. And I think they may have even changed things a little bit to make sure that my concept was sort of relayed. My view of who the Russians are, or the answer to this question, was a little bit more controlled. So what ultimately happened is we kind of went down, in Russian, by the way, not in English, in Russian, we kind of went down this sort of list of stereotypes about Russia. But the problem was the list of stereotypes was internal, as in they were Russian stereotypes of how Russians see themselves to foreigners. So it was a little off. Although, I mean, it was cool to go there. I still think what we had to say was very valuable. So I'm not saying that, like, they stole something from me or ruined the opportunity. What we had to say, I think, came across as interesting, and I think truth was revealed. But it wasn't the speech that I wrote in my mind and on a little piece of paper, like while I was on the airplane. And these people put me up in like a 5-star luxury hotel. They flew me out there, fed me and all this stuff, and then they didn't even want to use my expertise. So that's what you guys are in for. Unfortunately, we don't have too many people watching today, but that's okay. Only like 10. Usually we have 50. Not good. Maybe I picked a bad time, or I should have hyped this up more. But anyways, like I said, today was the first day when I wanted to do this as like an experiment and see if it worked. And unfortunately, the experiment kind of failed because, if you guys can't participate in the chat, or for some reason the system I used to beam the stream out to multiple sources wasn't recognizing people watching this, that sucks. So we're gonna have to try that again. I know it works. Other people do it, but anyways. So Today's topic then is, so who are the Russians? That is our big question. And of course, later on, after I'm done with the spiel, we'll have time where we can talk with each other and discuss. And remember, if you're on Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore, while this is going on, if you type under basically any post, let me just make a post. Hey, there is a live going on right now. Send questions as comments to this post. Okay, so anyways, you'll see that it's the most recent post on Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore, and people can essentially write there, but they can kind of write anywhere, and they'll eventually see it. But anyway, so who are the Russians? And my answer that made them so, well, I wouldn't exactly say that they were angry, but I think maybe they rethought inviting me, was that I think that the question is that, and that the problem is that the average Russian person does not know. The average Russian person doesn't know who the Russians are. And to an extent, I'm sure someone, if there's any Russian people watching right now, they're going to fall into what I consider to be an intellectual trap. We go back to the Winston Churchill that Russia is an enigma, trapped in a riddle, and wrapped in a pig in a blanket of mystery. I'm bad with quotes, but we all know it is. The mystery wrapped in an enigma or whatever. From Winston Churchill, we have that. And then we have that Russian quote, and I can never remember who said it, but they were an idiot, that Russia can't be understood with the mind. It just has to be believed in, which is also stupid. And both of these are stupid because they essentially present an argument of pure intellectual laziness, meaning that something is hard to understand, so I give up. That's essentially it. Now, having a few people believe this, or, having your weird uncle be like, I went to the Philippines and the people there were so different that I think they're mysterious and they're beyond my comprehension. I mean, if your dumb uncle thinks about the Philippines like that, that's not harmful to Filipino society. That's not really going to be too harmful for whatever society comes from, okay? But Russians really, those two quotes and some others are really deep in the Russian psyche, and they really like this idea that Russia is vague and mysterious. And that, again, means that this intellectual laziness is not just of your stupid uncle, but kind of like half or more of the country. And again, someone might say, but Tim, that's such a Western thing to say. That's such a Western thing to say, that everything can be analyzed and that everything can be viewed through a scientific, rational rational lens. That's so Western. You're putting Russia in the Western box, you hypocrite. I didn't say that everything is always perfectly rational with everything, but because of a couple neato quotes, especially one from Winston Churchill, who did not particularly like Russia very much, that we're just then going to say that Russia's mysterious, and then we can either not think about who the Russians are and what Russia is and why it is the way it is, so we just either don't think about it, or we can have it be like this sort of anything goes hippie thing where it's whatever you want it to be. And I'll tell you that this much, that if you have any sort of ideology or religious movement or culture that could just be anything, it is doomed to be destroyed. So Tim don't play that. I do not buy into this intellectual laziness. And I think that that's the first part of the problem, is that Russians themselves actually don't know the answer to the question, who are the Russians? So it's something we really need to think about, and it's something that you would think that we would have an answer to. So then let's just say I just criticized Russians. Now, what would Americans say? Again, the American educational system is not very philosophical, but Americans would probably maybe say, like, we're the defenders of democracy, or we're the capitalists. Well, Americans who are a little bit more visually similar to myself in terms of their manliness and Europeanness or something like that, They might talk about that or mention the Bill of Rights or something of that nature. But you'd at least get into some things, your democracy, your rights, who knows, something like that, some sort of something related to sort of the American system. But with Russians, it might be something like Russians are kind of the defenders of the world, but you also have to think then that essentially means that Russia just has to wait to be assaulted before it has relevance. See how that goes? So I'm not saying that Americans or the French or them Chinese fellas exactly have a completely worked out model of who they are, but you'd think they should and that they would. So anyways, there actually is one model of who the Russians are that exists, and it actually works, and it was created by a Russian person. He is the professor who shall not be named, or your video could be demonetized, or your channel gets the bounce. We all know who he is, and if you don't know who he is, ask Joaquin Flores, because he's the one who came up with the coded language for the professor, philosopher, who shall not be named. And in one of his books that I have read, and I cannot remember, I do know that he went through sort of a system, a brief sort of system, a sort of almost computer logic layout of who the Russians are. And he said that the Russians are essentially, if to be Russian is to be part of a sort of two, essentially, you say yes to two questions. Number one is, do you speak Russian? Number two is, do you believe in the current ideology of Russia? I would maybe say in a more less intellectual sort of way, are you part of Team Russia? Are you in agreement with the big mainstream blob? Might be a little smidge more accurate, but I am in no position to criticize a certain philosopher, so I won't do that. Now, why do I think that this model of two questions, do you speak Russian and do you believe in the current ideology, why does he think this model is so great, and why do I think that this model is so great and that it works? Let me tell you the story of one of our journalist friends, a guest of the show multiple times, amazing journalist and great guy who's kind of rebuilding his life right now. I wish him the best. If any of you guys are in Moscow, he's definitely a good guy to have a nice chat with. Robert Bridge, great journalist, a true legend, and a man who's been fighting for truth for a long, long time. But anyways, he told me that when he sort of first got some apartment in the tiny town, well, maybe I shouldn't mention where he lives. We'll just say a smaller place that's not Moscow. And he got this apartment there. And one of the neighbors kind of hears his accent, goes up to him, and, but in Russian, he's like, "Oh, the F do you think you are? You foreigners coming here. You know that Obama of yours is killing those people in Syria. He's setting us up to be killed." Which proved maybe to be true later. This, that, and the other. No. This whole thing about essentially Robert, much like what happens to me, is he became this sort of mirror of American foreign policy. Sometimes it's nice to be a mirror of American culture, but when you're a mirror of American foreign policy, you tend to get spit on a lot. So anyways, this guy really railed into him. Now, Robert doesn't speak Russian as well as I do, but he certainly speaks it definitely in the 5 to 6 out of 10 range, and he answered this guy pretty competently. He was like, "Look, man, I'm an independent journalist. I've risked a lot to come to this country, and I've basically given up the chance of ever being in the country of my birth to come here and tell the truth. And I write about the, again, this is during the Obama times, about the wrongs that have been done to Assad and the Syrians and the Arabs in general. And I didn't support this war. I didn't support the fake war in Iraq. I didn't support the fake war in Afghanistan. As a journalist, I've been standing against this, blah, 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 blah." And so the guy hears an answer in Russian. Again, not the best Russian, but an answer in Russian. Then again, for me, it's not the best, especially when I'm tired. And he gets an answer where Robert essentially explains that he's on the same ideological side as he is. And the guy just kind of goes, huh. And he turns around and leaves. And similar things have happened to me, but I like Robert's story better because it's more concise and it's very direct. But you kind of see two factors. Russians treat you very differently when you speak the language and when you are sort of part of Team Russia there, okay? And that's what Robert demonstrated to him. And it really fits in with this model from the philosopher who cannot be mentioned, that essentially Robert demonstrated that he had some knowledge of Russian and a very high level of agreement with the current ideology or with what society in Russia agrees with. So the philosopher sort of laid down the argument that the Russians of the past wasn't so much this very strict sort of particular ethnicity, but it was really people who then spoke Russian but were Orthodox Christians. We have to remember that essentially, if you spoke without an accent and you believed in Orthodoxy, you were part of Team Russian. It really didn't kind of matter too much who you were. If you think about things, one of the reasons why there are huge ethnicities and small ethnicities is because huge ethnicities tend to be more inclusive, where they're able to sort of absorb more people into them. I mean, if you think about things, for a very long time, there really wasn't a German. They were all people who were sort of Germanic, and they had all sorts of little principalities and kingdoms and this, that, and the other that all fought against each other. Then in the 1800s, they sort of merged together, and Germans became a bigger thing. China, too, had a lot of different regions that had a lot of different fighting, but then they kind of were able to merge into one. And same thing to an extent with Japan. A lot of places went through this similar process, Italy, of merging and all that. But Russia, especially in terms of geographic area, had the most merging to go. So if you think about it, this model also really works if you're going to have a society that is a giant land empire. You know, that essentially anyone who speaks the language of the empire and believes in the idea of the empire is good to go. That's how you can have a big society. When you get in a Chechen society where you have to prove to the 7th generation that your ancestors came from Chechnya or no Chechen wife for you, you know, that's a very different thing. Or with our friends from, unfortunately, even when I have nice things to say about them, you're not supposed to mention the particular religious ethnic group that resides in Israel. They also had this policy where, you know, their ethnicity is passed on through mom. So what happens then is it means that they can't be a society that sort of expands and conquers, because men go out, and if they sort of go out and conquer and take more territory, well, they can't really do anything with the local women. So they're essentially stuck to stay home if they want to have children or reproduce anyways. So the Russian sort of thing here, again, really lends to this expansive, big land empire sort of mentality. But anyways, he brought up first the thing about the Orthodox Christian who spoke Russian as being sort of it. Then there became the sort of Soviet man, where the person who was Russian in the Soviet Union was someone who spoke Russian, again, without an accent, and someone who believed in socialism, communism, the Soviet way, whatever the heck you want to call it. That was the Soviet man of that time. And you can definitely see that. And in modern times, things are a little bit vaguer because you don't quite know what our ideology even is in Russia, but we can definitely see that there are, let's just say, people, regardless of sort of maybe what their visuals kind of look like to an extent, but their attitude and their sacrifice, especially currently for Russia, are noted. And if they speak Russian like everyone else does flawlessly, then they are definitely sort of part of Team Russia, which also then lends to the fact that when some people, like the president of Chechnya, Kadyrov, who of course speaks Russian as a native language, but he does specifically retain the southern drawl, which makes him sound a little bit different. That kind of starts to open this question about the people who are sort of like, because I sort of relayed this theory to you just now as if it's like two switches, like you're either speak Russian or don't, or you believe in the ideas of Russia or you don't. And these aren't so much like light switches as they are like gauges that are from 0 to 100. And so, or someone could say that Kadyrov is sort of like, in the Russian language thing, he's sort of like a 90 or a 95, not out of 100, because he maintains a very thick, local yet not traditionally Russian accent. And maybe he actually does that on purpose because he sees himself, of course, as part of this greater Russia, but sees himself, number one, as Chechen, and then number two, as some sort of Russian citizen. You could even get into the fact that, I'll put it this way, again, if we talk about the certain religious ethnic group that resides in Israel, when that particular religious group is in Russia, and they tend to have political beliefs that are in agreement with the Russian mainstream, be that in the Soviet Union or now. I mentioned during the times of media. It's kind of hard to say in the Russian Empire before the rise of media. But during the Soviet Union or now, those people are kind of always referred to as Russians. But it's kind of interesting. The more that same person with that same sort of religious ethnic background starts to say more and more things against the current ideology, the way of doing things in Russia, all of a sudden they become either, let's just say, Russian religious ethnic minority, or they just start getting to be referred to as a religious ethnic minority. Interesting how that happens. So essentially, again, where we have this sort of agreement thing, whereas people who are in this high agreement of Russianness with the native language, someone's dad was something somewhere, or someone's cousin was this, who cares? They're all part of the team. It's amazing. It's great. But when they start to go against the view of the mainstream masses, all of a sudden, whether they are or not, everyone's kind of looking at them like, there's got to be something with them. There's no way. Their last name, that's got to be something not Russian. Got to be something weird about that. That spelling is a little off. You see what I mean? And so, in Russia, we actually do have a model presented by definitely one of the top most famous Russian people in history that really works. And who answers the question of who are the Russians. They're the people who speak this Russian language and who believe in this Russian idea, which changes over time. But essentially, I think that really actually answers the question of who are the Russians. So again, if we get into this, when the overwhelming majority of people say support the actions of the military and the president in the war in Ukraine, and then the ones who don't, all of a sudden their Russianness ticks down, or people, again, like all of us who are watching this, because this is generally for foreign people who have accents. If you have an accent, you're never going to speak Russian 100 out of 100. So you're always going to be a little bit off this Russianness thing. And I've seen a lot of videos that are like, you'll never be Chinese, you'll never be an Arab, you'll never be Mexican or whatever, name your country, but people who want to immigrate into these societies, you'll never be Thai. They really can't. But in Russia, you can come pretty darn close. Because of the accent, you'll never really get to be part of the team. Anyways, are there any... No comments. So anyways, no comments at all? Really? Okay. Well, anyways, if you guys have any questions or comments, that would be a good time. Or if you want to just have like a chit-chat here, we'll chit-chat. Because I think I'm getting close to the end of my speech here. Sam already wants to talk. Let's have Ann on. Sam, last time we had his live stream, you were on like 3 times. Ann wasn't. So anyways, I think I covered this topic, and you're going to come on in like 30 seconds pretty well about who are the Russians. We have a model for this. The 2-question model from the philosopher who cannot be named. it is the answer to this question. And I'm just so like kind of heartbroken that I couldn't explain this to sort of like the youth of the world or the youth of let's just say the youth of important parents, the up and coming people of BRICS. That there's this really interesting model, and I think that we need to take this from being something that's written to intellectual works to actually being like part of the national school curriculum. Because again, when you look at the way Russians see themselves, and maybe even sometimes the way that maybe Russians should see themselves, because remember, there's a lot of Western propaganda here, and you start to see these Russian nationalists who really start to look at Russia the same way Russians as being this particular ethnicity where if both your parents aren't Russian, you can't be Russian. And what does that lead to? Living in a small Westphalian nation. And who does that benefit? I think you know. Anyways, Anna, you're allowed to come on. I just threw out a conspiracy theory right before you came on. Whoops, I banged the microphone. That probably sounded horrible. Hello?
Okay.
Oh, I
Hi,
can hear you
can you
now.
hear me?
Fantastic. Yes, I can. Okay.
Can you? Okay, great. Well, I've been reading a lot about this. Just happened to catch your broadcast, which is great. I think you have to look at history. Russians have to look at history to understand themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because they had a fantastic culture, which was squashed, during communism. And so they really need to go back into history to find out who they were before that. And like in any culture, music is extremely important. If you listen to their music, the great composers, that will give them insight. Gives people insight into who they were. Interestingly, in the era of the aristocracy in Europe, the French, of course, the aristocracy snubbed the Russian aristocracy a bit, and Britain was always competitive with it.
Mm-hmm.
So remember reading somewhere that Russians who I think feel very, very deeply, they have a deep soul, were hurt. Were hurt that they weren't as accepted as the French, let's say, and
They still
other
are.
people. Well, yes, they're hurt because they feel so deeply. But what they said back in history, according to this book, is that they just said, "Well, I guess we'll have to go it on our own." And I think the only hiccup, if you can help them when you're there with the people, the only hiccup is what I would call perhaps a little melancholia. They're prone to a bit of melancholia, and part of that comes from feeling deeply. A lot of it comes from the culture. You can't put out that kind of music and that kind of depth if you don't feel deeply.
Yeah. Well, here's
And
something. We're going to pick apart your theories here just a little bit. So you said that one of the main things was restoring what was lost before communism came in. Well, over the last 30 years, has any of that been done, in your opinion?
I don't know. I'd love to hear from you what happened during Soviet times, and I love to ask you the question: how do they feel now about people who were not communist in those days? I mean, many people bowed, succumbed because they had to. Like any country, any people succumb to what they have to. But do they hold a grudge? And the other thing I want to say very much is they are deeply Christian, deeply Christian. If you look at old movies, just happened to see some of the wars. I really don't remember what war, but the military generals in the corner of the military barracks had that icon up in the corner, of the room with a candle burning. So they are deeply Christian, and I think all that is plays a role in the problems today.
We had a question there. Let me mute you there. Not because you're a bad person, but because I don't want any sort of background noise. So it's just sort of the effect of communism on who the Russians are. Oh boy, that's kind of a hard one. I just wanted to sort of bring up that maybe I'm going to dodge your question here a little bit, but to bring up something that comes up a lot when we talk about Russia's identity, is there's this really deep desire, especially among Russians themselves. And in fact, Russians would like your answer. Maybe not so much the dissing on communism part, but the whole thing about like what was lost from the 1800s, and about like having deeper feelings, and especially about like the composers of the 1800s and writers and all that. Like, if you ask Russians a lot of stuff, again, about maybe who they are, and their answers are going to be something like Putin, Dostoevsky, Tchaikovsky, something, something, something. But you also have to remember that, like, just saying randomly, which is a problem, is I have trouble expressing this to you guys, how many of these weird people from that cult that claims to fight cults of people who actually, to an extent, worship Putin, or not Putin, Pushkin, excuse me. They worship Pushkin. So it kind of, so I almost have like a bitter enmity towards Pushkin based on nothing. But again, because these people just throw Pushkin at you, and you're just supposed to like, basically, Pushkin wasn't an ideologue, but they treat him like one. So you can kind of just make up anything about him. So that's kind of the problem, is it's like, okay, so then what does Pushkin mean? What does Dostoevsky mean? Because, like, okay, Dostoevsky was famous because a lot of his main characters are actually people he despises, and yet he had a very good, grand ability to actually create realistic characters of people he doesn't understand. That would be a very rare thing in Hollywood today. So, very interesting. And also, the main characters of people he doesn't particularly like or understand tend to be very, undesirable main characters, which is something unique. But what does that mean? Like, what does that do now? What does Pushkin do now? What does Tchaikovsky do now? And I think this sort of, we're stuck in the 1800s kind of thing. It doesn't help. And if anything, I would kind of think that if we're going to, have this big thing in Russia that, like, okay, again, I don't agree with this. I don't think it matters. I agree with the two question theory. That's what I just presented. I think that really gets a clean answer, and it's a flexible answer. But if we're going to do this thing where everything is put Dostoevsky and Pushkin, like, it'd be nice if there was maybe like 10 points about Pushkin that are these like 10 amazing things that are these like noble truths from his work and opinions that, are like speak as like universal aspects of Russian culture. But you don't see that anywhere. You don't see that on TV. You don't, not at school. And again, it goes back to this vague is cool. It's the mysterious Russian soul. Doesn't have to be mysterious. We could understand it. And I think it really holds back society when, again, I've gotten into a lot of arguments with people also over stupid arguments. But again, people write me a lot of messages over VK, guys. A lot of Russian people. And they rip into me and I rip into them. And I think another flawed opinion is that, like, classical music holds some sort of mysterious something. And again, I bring up Tchaikovsky because he's the most famous. What was there? Rachmaninoff or whatever was really famous. There's a few of them. But Tchaikovsky, I can actually say, is like the one composer of classical music I've probably listened to the most. I'm not a huge classical music fan, but I've definitely listened to Tchaikovsky a lot over the years. And like, so what? What does that do now? My kids aren't gonna listen to Tchaikovsky, and guess what? Tchaikovsky also wasn't an ideologue. Although you could kind of, envision things in your mind about this period of invasion that, happened during the early 1800s. I mean, yeah, that's cool, and the music does really portray that without having any words, which is impressive. But at the same time, it's like, that doesn't matter now. That doesn't matter to teenagers now. That doesn't matter to the next generation. That doesn't, and especially, that doesn't matter to the people who were alive during the foundation of Russia. That's really this obsession with the 1800s kind of also has this sort of implied way of looking at things, that Russian identity didn't happen until Pushkin. And I think that that's a very bad way of looking at things. There are a lot of intellectuals who argue whether Russia really existed as being some kind of thing before Christianity in the 900s. or not, or should that pre-Christian, pre-literacy, as in prehistoric in the literal meaning of things, as in prehistory, during that prehistoric period, should that count or not? That's a kind of interesting question. But when we sort of root everything in the golden age of Russian literature, it kind of makes everything else look bad. Because also, what does it have to say then about after the golden age of literature as well? So that's it. That's the end. There's, this is kind of like the Quran. There's a final prophet, and that's the end of the road. Are you so sure about this? So again, and I think Russians would love your answer because it's a little bit more on the vague side, and it ticked those boxes of things that are sort of part of Russian culture, but I don't think that they really add up to answering who are the Russians. Let me take an example. Okay, let me take a little sip of something here. So who are the Americans? Edgar Allan Poe, Mark Twain. Hemingway was American, right? Hemingway. Right or wrong? I don't even remember. It doesn't matter. So, or then again, we could get an argument. Shakespeare. I mean, we do speak English. What does that mean? Let's just say, like Russians would just Pushkin, Dostoevsky. Okay, Edgar Allan Poe and Mark Twain. What does that say about America? Mm-hmm. What percentage of the American population have read all of those books? In Russia, a lot of that's mandatory, so maybe you could say that on a sort of subconscious level, because everyone is forced to read Pushkin and Dostoevsky, it's a uniting factor. Like how more in medieval times or even to this day, everyone in Europe who could read the Bible, and everyone in the Islamic world who could read the Quran kind of at some point, right? Something very unifying. But in America, we really don't. So what does that mean? So essentially, like, if we're trying to understand who are Americans now in this weird, like, postmodern thing we're in, so let's just crack open some Read the Raven, and that's going to reveal the truth. That's a bunch of BS. Or, like, if we look back to then, what American music, again, is this like, going back to the marches of Sousa, is that who it would be? Because we didn't really have, I'm trying to think of, I think there were a few great composers besides Sousa. But anyways, are we then stuck with maybe, I don't know, Elvis and Motown? We could maybe say that the height of American music is really like the whole, like the rhythm and blues, Elvis, Motown, early rock. So that's it. So all the stuff that's happening today doesn't count. It doesn't mean anything. And, we need to force our kids to listen to Elvis. Like, when you think of it, it's like, so let's put it this way. You're like, okay, is Elvis a part of America? Is there something very American-ish about Elvis? Yes. Is there something very America-ish about Mark Twain? Yes. But then when you kind of like look at it in the reverse, and you're like, okay, let's build the idea of what America is by Mark Twain and Elvis, it doesn't work. It seems to kind of go in like one direction. So anyways, I think Ann wanted to get revenge on me. So Ann, you are back on the program, and we'll have Mike after Ann is done, after I have a comment. Hello, Ann. Hello. You're back.
Yeah. I'm so thank you. All right. So my comment to you is, everybody must go back a bit to reclaim their culture. This is worldwide. That's the trouble everybody's facing with the kids on the phones and everybody is struggling for culture. And that's why you have to go back. For America, if you want an example, to me, it was the Cowboys. I mean, all those Western movies, good guy, bad guy, exactly what America was founded on. And my suggestion to you, to the people there is don't reinvent the wheel. Don't be searching for something to create something when you have a rich legacy. Adapt it, recognize it. And one last thing, you mentioned composers, like I say, I read a lot. Rachmaninoff, who is one of my favorite, has written probably the greatest piece of music to me. And he was a little mixed up. His first symphony was a little extreme. It was not well received in Paris.
No.
So he talked to a psychologist. He had a friend who was a psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever, and kind of straightened his head out a little bit. And then Symphony Number 2 was probably the best piece of music ever written. So, and he dedicated it to that doctor. So, I mean, everybody needs that. Everybody, this is why you have tribes, families, you talk it over. But I say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Okay.
Not these days.
Let me let you go there, and I'll just say real quickly then, Mike, you'll be on real soon. What you're kind of saying about how there might be a sort of period of reflection as we sort of all jumped into the modern era. All the cultures of the world who essentially did this, I don't know, maybe not so much the Taliban in Afghanistan. They're kind of keeping it real. But for the most part, as soon as you jump into the modern era, you really lose something from the past. And there could be this sort of universal desire to maybe, for a lot of people, and especially if you look at the whole BRICS concept, I think there definitely is this desire to maybe reattach a bit with the past. Maybe not fully, but not to say that like, oh, the modern era is awesome. Let's scientific rationalism is the only option. We are all liberal now. Nah, that seems to have failed. So I definitely think there is some looking backwards. But again, in this quest for identity, we'd have to be careful of that. What you said about cowboys was actually very good, because the cowboy isn't one person, and it's not, it is a body of movies, but it's kind of an archetype. Whereas when people talk about, like, especially the concept of state security weirdos write me about Pushkin, they never mention that. Like, if they said that there was like a Pushkin archetype where they read Pushkin and they put together this Pushkin-esque vision of a Russian person based on his books, and they're like, this Pushkin-esque Russian guy really matches reality, or maybe even to an extent is kind of an idealized version of a Russian person that we should be like, I'd be cool with that. I would say, hey, concept of state security guys, you and your weird cult, you got that one right, and I'm going to give you a high five, because that's a model that you could share with other people or something. And the cowboy is that archetype. Of course, we could sort of debate who is the cowboy, but you have your rugged individual. I'll get to you, Mike. I'm not ignoring you. I don't forget about you. He's the rugged individual. He's self-sufficient. He knows what he's doing. He's a little bit outside the law. We have to remember that although we've been a little bit pansified since World War II, the cowboy, I'll put it this way, he knows what right and wrong is on his own. Gosh dang. So anyways, that's kind of a cool archetype, and if we want to get into archetypes, that's a much better answer than read Pushkin. Anyways, Mike, you wanted to talk, and now you don't want to talk. I just unmuted you. Do you want to talk? Mike, hello? Mike Holmes. I love, after today I had to read a bunch of rough last names for this voiceover work I was doing. I love a good Anglo-Saxon first and last name. Mike Holmes, do you want to be part of the program? Going once. Oh, I heard something. Hello, Mike. You wanted to talk?
I just wanted to encourage some literature that I think plays into narratives, and stories are very important things for us to line up our minds into our histories and cultures. And I'm a Canadian that kind of started to get red pilled and black pilled and white pilled with everything that we got going on in the world these days. Yeah. And I didn't even know Russians' history when it came to their role in the United States and their relationship with Canada. And I chewed through all of Matthew Ehret's work of the Unfinished Symphony, Volume 1 through 4, and the Untold History of Canada, Volume 1 through 4. And I found that it sure was neat to actually realize that there is two sides to every culture. There's that sort of the empire that worked their way in and set up your schooling and shut down your education and got people to be sort of dumbed down in their heads about what's going on in their culture. And then when you do some digging and you realize that there's a hero's story that's in there. So I do believe you got to look over your shoulder to find out the examples of the hero's stories more than,
Yeah, go on. Oh no. I can't hear you anymore. Mike, what happened? You had a good roll going there. I was liking what you had to say. Oh well. 3, 2, 1, and unfortunately no mic. You had audio and then it vanished. But anyways, yeah, I mean, kind of what he was saying, like about positives and negatives in that. Like if we go into archetypes, like the Russian liberal who is starting to kind of fade into history, which is nice. Which is something where I can take a little bit of devilish glee that they've really, if you think about over like this, the last 15 years since I've been in Russia, going from essentially really the dominant voice of the media to now like squeaking in the shadows at best. Sam, we'll get to you soon. So, the Russian liberal has really been ideologically crushed. However, the Russian liberal, though I may not like them that much, they are a good negative archetype of the Russian person. They are really, the Russian liberal in their particular flavor really reflects certain realities of Russia. Like I've mentioned to you guys before, some of you don't believe it exists or you like to fight me on it. The Russian inferiority complex, the sort of Russian liberal is a reaction to that. It's someone who they don't only not only feel the inferiority complex to the West, they live it. They commit their whole worldview to it. And they also tend to reflect this very well. One thing that Russians are really bad at is wealthy Russian people are terrible with their kids. You know how there's that problem where, like, in the West, we've always had, like, there's old money, and new money really has a lot of trouble. After like a generation or two, the kids get all spoiled and they waste it. The Russians, especially like I guess right now after the 90s, boy, the Russians are really bad at that. I think there is even an expression in Russian, like I can't remember it in Russian, but it's something like the grandsons of great men are traitors. With the way Russians who are rich raise their kids, the sons of great men are traitors. So again, this Russian liberal who might be a negative thing, I think that they actually sort of, they are an archetype that actually reflects Russian culture, but like the dark, self-hating, inferior kind, that sort of thing, always looking to the West as superior, blah, blah, blah. It's too snowy here. Anyways, Sam wanted to talk. Hello, Sam. You're on the air.
Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I had a couple questions. One is, what is the remaining policies or ideologies that are left over in Russia today in the Federation after the socialist Soviet times? And the second part of it would be, which of those do you agree with? Are they positive, negative? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In
Well, then
terms of,
here, let's let me mute you there so there's no weird background noise. Well, that's the one I wasn't kind of expecting today. Maybe in the future I might have to cover that one in more detail. But you have to understand that when the Soviet Union collapsed, and in the 1990s they came up with the new system, they didn't just draw it from scratch. Something was there, and that something was, the Soviet legal system. So in a lot of ways, the Russian Soviet Federated Socialist Republic, which has the easy to say abbreviation RFSF, wait, Russian Soviet, so RSFSR. Ugh. Boy, that's hard to say, although it is reversible. It goes both ways, reading wise. But anyway, so a lot of the laws that we have today, and the basis of all this, comes really from the Soviet Union, because there sort of had to be something. And that's where you sort of then get into the sort of goofiness of like the Russian Constitution having a lot of the guarantees of socialism, which none of them were met during the 90s. Like none. Which also then sets a really bad precedent where you can have these social guarantees, but everyone knows they're not going to be implemented. You know what I mean? It's not like when the United States became a country, it was from a moment of triumph, and you could say things were sort of eventually going to go downhill. Russia became a country as it is today in a moment of complete and total defeat. So the thing is that, like, if you were to say, let's just take someone, some of the people who are my critics who are very pedantic, they could make the argument that because Russia didn't like completely delete everything from the Soviet Union, and it continues to have all these guarantees, social guarantees from the communist era, that essentially it's still communist, it's just wrapped up in a weird package, and that soon with this alliance with China, we'll be communist again. That is nuts, but if you're pedantic enough, you could look at it that way. You could also look at it from the standpoint of a little bit of ideological exhaustion in the 90s where, you know, the people were desperate and they weren't really worried about the meaning of this, that, or the other. So again, it goes back to what I call the big mess theory of politics, that a lot of people think that because like this thing happened and that thing happened, it's all part of some sort of grand master plan of the reptilians or whatever. I think that in a lot of ways, things are sort of hard to understand or confusing because human beings are a mess, and we can recreate things that are sort of messy. And the whole 1990s still leaves this massive mess. And there's really no way, like someone, I think it was Sergei Glaziev, said that you can't change the economy. Or no, was that our guest, Mr. Kostin? It was Mr. Kostin, who was our guest about a few topics, including the digital ruble. He said that you really can't fix the economy of a country because it's like fixing the engine of a plane while it's flying. And in a lot of ways, that would be sort of like going back now and trying to de-Sovietize everything in Russian law. It just would be too hard. So essentially, you really can't get rid of the past as hard as you try. So anyway, Sam is back. Maybe I answered your question, maybe I didn't. Hello, Sam, you're back. Remember, if anyone wants to raise their hand and talk or comment, now would be a great time to do it. So
that makes a lot of sense what you're saying, because it was basically, I don't know, the openness and then the what did they call it? The shock therapy of the economics from people like Jeffrey Sachs coming in. Forced Russia into a new paradigm, but they couldn't fully abandon the old paradigm. So that makes sense. But what my question is how much of what's going on now is actually positive? Because in the United States, there's natural resources that belong to the country, but they've been privatized. But in Russia, the natural resources belong to the people. And so I don't know, I think that's better, because I mean, why else would you have a nation if it wasn't there to provide for the people a basic livable resource that's at their hands? Here in the United States, you know, the borders are open, anyone can come in, anyone can have an anchor baby. And it's starting to feel like it's not really a country that's meant to support the people. It's actually more like a clearinghouse for evil behavior.
If I can say about resource management, this is so let me then again, I always mute people because these weird background noises drive me nuts. Maybe I am ADHD and I don't know it. But I can tell you that there's a big debate within Russian society where it's like, okay, in the Constitution, the material sort of wealth of the country, be they the trees, be they the oil, be they whatever, you know, the ability to transport big boats down rivers, all that fancy stuff is supposedly the wealth of the people in the state and all that. So then it sort of begs the question is then, okay, so what should that look like? One of the more arguments we've had over the last many years of our existence in Russia is it's been, well, that essentially means that the government collects a lot of taxes, which then means you pay less taxes, and then a lot of that goes to the usual sort of government stuff of fire trucks and roads and ambulances and all that, and that's all well and good, and that's one of the reasons why Russia can have low taxes yet survive. But a lot of people don't agree with that, Sam. They think that they're getting screwed, that the Constitution says that this sort of stuff belongs to everyone. Where's my cut? I've heard numerous different offerings before the last, I think, like major election cycle before the war, there was a little bit of talk of, what if we just kind of start out and give everyone like 10,000 rubles a month as their sort of cut from the wealth of the sale of natural resources, just to kind of see where this all goes. That was something that was being talked about, probably to keep the status quo, just in case. Because voters everywhere, be they Russians or Americans or whatnot, tend to get suckered down certain lines of voting. I mean, if someone goes up to you and they're like, hey, I've got this program where you're going to get this, that, and the other if you vote for me. And it's sometimes kind of hard to fight against that. Trust me, guys. My student loans in America got forgiven after many years of paying them due to a certain set of circumstances I don't quite want to explain here online. I don't think it's quite appropriate. But don't worry, it wasn't just yours truly. It was for basically everyone I also went to university with. They also got cut off. So let's just say that didn't happen. And at this point, the burden of paying those student loans would go on to my parents because I don't really have a mechanism to pay them anymore. It would be something that would definitely, I think, motivate me and my parents to, vote to get to whichever candidate would say student loan forgiveness, baby. Whether they do it or not is another thing. There are certain things where you can't expect the average common masses to be noble. Nobleness is an exception. It's not the rule. So again, that could have been a mechanism to keep people voting for United Russia. That has not happened. But c'est la vie. The Just Russia Party, or sometimes Fair Russia Party, depending on the translation, they actually calculated it out to being more like 100,000 rubles, which because of poopy-doopy inflation is now like $1,000. It used to be more like about $1,500. So whether it be $1,000 or $1,500, they thought that basically that amount of money from the sale of Russia's natural resources could roughly be distributed to kind of everyone who's a Russian citizen, willy-nilly, and it wouldn't really hurt the Russian state, and that would be a means of actually reflecting the constitutional guarantees that Russia has. Now, another thing that, if you've noticed in America, the Constitution has been sort of kind of pooped all over, to say it the most, I guess, polite, kiddie way I could. The U.S. Constitution is not in good condition after all these Patriot Acts and dealing with certain illnesses and Guantanamo Bay and Snowden and Assange. The whole, well, then again, I guess Assange is a foreigner, but still, generally, those kind of things would apply to him. But anyways, Assange is a little bit of a tough case because he's a foreigner. But anyways, after all of that, if we remember back, we used to live in an American society where things were really debated as being either constitutional or not. And then essentially, if something was constitutional, or if someone felt something was constitutional, you have the emphasis on the word felt, rather than meticulously argued. They felt something was constitutional, it was a good thing. And if they felt something was unconstitutional, it was a bad thing. There was a time in America where people thought that way. I remember it. I'm old enough to remember that. That's kind of gone now. And but in Russia, it's never really existed. And I think that's probably something that's going to have to kind of come up in the future. Is it's like, okay, if we're going to have a constitutional society that has this, that, or the other guarantee, what do those mean? How does this all work out? And that's one of the things too, where, like the Russian Constitution is in effect, but it's also not very debated very much, especially by the common masses. So that's another thing where, yeah, we're gonna go down the road with this whole Constitution. And at some point, someone is going to have to, there's going to have to be some public discussion of it. But that'll happen probably after the war. But again, it's sort of like, there's a lot of nice sounding stuff in the Russian Constitution. But the question is, how does it manifest itself? Most people don't know. Again, like you just mentioned, with the whole, the resources belong to everyone. Cool. What does that look like? What does belonging to everyone mean? Or let's try to think of another one. Oh, well, some things are just sort of accepted. Like, it's like, okay, we have the same freedom of speech concept in theory in Russia that we do in America, if even maybe written more bluntly. Let's look that up. Let's see here. Let's see. Where's my browser? Let's see. Russian Constitution in English. Where's this thing? Let's go with speech. Rights and freedoms. Everyone shall be guaranteed the freedom of ideas and speech. The propaganda or agitation instigating social, racial, national hatred. Hold on. What act was that? Oh, I didn't even look at the act. I'm dumb. Chapter 2. Oh, boy. Chapter 2 is kind of big. So everyone shall be guaranteed the freedom of ideas and speech. Yes, national now. Propaganda of social, racial, national, religious, linguistic supremacy shall be banned. No one may be forced to express his views and convictions or to reject them. Now that's one in Russia that's generally really well obeyed. No one may be forced to express his views or convictions or to reject them. That's, for some reason, modern Russia really, really actually behaves in accordance with that one. However, we're going to get up to a big exception to maybe even to that. Everyone shall have the right to freely look for, receive, transmit, produce, and distribute information by any legal way. The list of data comprising state secrets shall be determined by a federal law. The list of data comprising state secrets. Okay, so state secrets are specifically excluded in the Constitution. Interesting. The freedom of mass communication shall be guaranteed. Censorship shall be banned. Full stop, as the British say. Gay stuff is banned in Russia now for adults and children. No gay propaganda. You're done. That is in absolute and direct contradiction to Article 29, Section 2 of the Russian Constitution, but everyone believes it and everyone agrees with it. And that's where we sort of get into where's Russia going, because the Russian Constitution was written by liberals for liberals to make Russia liberal, and Russians don't believe in that. So one of the problems is if we just light the Constitution on fire and we don't obey it, well, then Russia kind of falls apart because there's a lot of guarantees and stuff. But at the same time, the question is, how do we very often don't obey any of this stuff, or two, things like during a war, obviously a few people have been arrested because they've led massive campaigns of disinformation against the army. It doesn't say anything in here where if you're, taking bribes to lie to the public, that is then not defended by freedom of speech. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of things, again, you can't really look at modern Russia or the United States really anymore that much through the filter of constitutional rules. Obviously, the United States should look at itself through the filter of constitutional rules, and it did in the past. That'd be nice if it would do that. But with Russia, in a lot of ways, like Russian culture really goes against this, except this whole thing about not forcing people to believe in things or punishing them for not believing that. That's kind of a reaction to communism that is one of the reasons it's nice to live here. And one of the reasons why some of you are shocked that proselytizing is banned here. It's banned for a reason. And again, I think that is then, again, one of these contradictions where proselytizing blocks the thing about trying to sort of force people to believe in things, but then don't you have the right to express it? So again, you get into a lot of problems here. And a lot of the actual laws and policies that excite you foreign people to move to Russia, who tend to be very religiously conservative, tend to be in violation of a lot of liberal principles that are even enshrined within the law. So, you know what? Yeah. So citizens of the Russian Federation shall enjoy equal access to state service. That's nice. Shall have the right to participate in managing state affairs both directly and through their representatives. The Russian Federation shall have well, so that's interesting. Russian citizens shall have the right to participate in managing state affairs both directly and through their representatives. So Russians apparently have the right to referendums and more on the books. That's something interesting. Says the Russian Federation shall have the right to elect or be elected state bodies of power. Deprived of the right to elect elections shall be recognized by court, legal, and so to address person as well to submit. Oh yes, this is another important one that's very big in things that makes Russia different. Citizens, Article 33. Citizens of the Russian Federation shall have the right to address personally, as well as to submit individual and collective appeals to state organs and local self-government bodies. If you are a Russian citizen, you write an appeal to the government, they have to read it and answer. Sometimes the answers suck. Sometimes you have to write them a lot of times, but they have to answer and justify the answer. So you can sort of drill them down by just annoying them with this constant bombardment of demanding letters. So that's one thing where, like, Article 33 is actually very well obeyed. You'll get your answer. So it's kind of weird, like what things do get, like, in the Russian Constitution are super in line with the way the culture actually works, and some things that just kind of sound nice. The economic activity aimed at monopolization and unfair competition shall not be allowed. Sometimes. The right of private property shall be protected by law. Well, that's a big difference from the Soviet Union, which had personal property. Everyone shall have the right to property, possess, use, and dispose of it both personally and jointly with other people. So that's also interesting. You have the right to jointly own stuff. That's a little bit of the olden days there. No one may be deprived of property otherwise than by court decision. Forced confiscation of property for state needs may be carried out only on the proviso of preliminary and complete compensation. Yeah, so that's kind of like, what is that? Article 3 of the Bill of Rights there, that you can't quarter troops. Well, in Russia you can quarter troops, but they have to pay you back. And it also gets into the whole thing of, like, when they need to knock down your apartment, they have to give you the same, an equivalent apartment. The right of inheritance shall be guaranteed. That's another hugely important one. The first laws of Russia were about inheritance. Yeah, there's your little trivia for the day. So anyways, let me let me read some of the questions. We'll maybe take another 2 viewers or something, and we'll call this a big deep dive a day. I think it's kind of cool. There is an extant, maybe extinct, civilization that remembers existent, you probably mean, or existing civilization that remembers the invasion of the Golden Horde and also evicting them a couple centuries later. Well, again, we were going back to who are the Russians. One of the things that does make Russia sort of different is it is a culture that was completely and totally occupied and assimilated into a different empire that also broke free and kind of got back on its own and became a superpower. I'm not sure if that's completely unique in history, especially if you go into the Middle East where there's been a lot of shifting over. Well, Egypt never became a real power again. Oh boy, I'm sure someone's going to think of another civilization that was able to do that, but it's not a common occurrence, I guess. Sober Riot. Appealing to culture is the tool for asking for noble behavior from the common person. It certainly can be in Russia. Oh, to get people to behave more normally with the appeal to culture? Well, yeah, if we really... Again, this goes into things where... If you guys knew how many speeches I've given in Russia about the media where I mention models of behavior, that if we want people in Russia to behave a certain way, and we have all these federal TV channels, and don't worry, I know TV's for old people, and we have all this sort of federal media in general, and all this grant money, why don't we focus on creating or showing and presenting in our media the models of behavior that we want to see around us in society? Of course, we can't completely idealize people, or then the movies suck because they're full of unrealistic people, but models of behavior are important in the media. People in Russia drink less and smoke less than they used to. Why? because they made drinking in public become a bad thing, a thing that looks bad. So now the model of behavior where you don't see people walking around drunk, and if you do, they could get in trouble, and they have to kind of do it in a sneaky way behind a bush, which some people might have had to have done after winning a certain minor league American football championship. I'm not going to say who did that. So models of behavior work. Anyway, Sober Riot wants to join us. Hello. Hello? Sober Riot. I can't hear you. Maybe you can hear me? I can't hear you. Going once. Going twice. Going thrice. Sold. So for some reason, Sober Riot is... he wants to speak again. Try clicking on everything. Sober Riot. Try clicking on it. Just click like a madman. So anyways...
Okay.
Oh my God! There you are. Hello.
Yeah. Hey, thanks a lot. Yeah, you said models of behavior that need to be duplicated. I just, one of the things that was out when I early on in my early on after I came here was Lunatic. I mean, Lunatic is
the alien moon,
the cartoon
or whatever.
Yeah. I mean that is when I first saw that, I was like, wow, they know how people should act. like this is, I was really, really deeply impressed with
because it's very like friendly and trying to. It's very much the sort of turn the other cheek kind of message. Friendliness, is that why?
Well, no, because I mean, it's that too, and of course it's hilarious, and but mainly because he doesn't ever cover up the truth. If something's uncomfortable, I did something wrong, or I just say, let me make sure that everything here is muted. If he does something wrong or something bad happens that he knows he's going to have to take he's going to have to take something on the nose to take a hit to get out. He goes through that. He doesn't. He stands. Basically, they always revert back to tell the truth, take the consequences, and on both sides, whoever was offended and whoever was the offender, can be a mature enough person to have the relationship continue because we bring the truth out into the open. That's all I got.
Well, maybe you've seen. I can't remember your kids' ages and all that. But have you seen Raditeli, as in the show called The Parents?
I haven't.
Well, that's a good one.
We haven't had a TV in a long time. That's
okay. Well, that's one you might actually then want to try downloading because my kids love it, and it's. I found it stunning because although the show was actually started many years ago, before the war, at first my instincts were like, this almost looks like a reaction to the war and the change of the media. But my children, they love it, and it's about a family of the mom, the dad, and the three sons. But the thing that I was impressed by is the one son, kind of becomes like an adult, and he has his girlfriend, and they get married at a really young age, and then the wife gets pregnant, and they have a multi-generational household. Oh, imagine that being on like today's Disney Channel.
And
you know what I mean?
And they're all heterosexual.
So it's also remember, it's implied. Of course, everyone knows, where'd the baby come from? We all know. But it's kind of implied that, that's his chick, and she's not just there to bang. She was there to be his wife, and they have this kid and all that stuff. So I'm kind of impressed. The only thing that maybe I don't like is that the wife kind of she's the kind of character that they made her have like a gimmick where she kind of buys into trends. But I think on some level that actually helps because every stupid trend that's out there she believes in, but they also, the other characters demonstrate how stupid that is. So maybe it's not that bad. But anyways, you should really check it out. It's a pretty nifty TV show that actually my children, they beg to watch it. So,
Thanks.
Anyways, thank you very much. I'm going to mute you now. Very unexpected comment. For those of you who are looking, Lunatic is he is a very pink individual. Maybe I can get an image of Lunatic on the screen for you here. Let's see. Not the person I expected to be. Let's see. Let's put this on the other side of the screen. We do the screen share. We share screen 2, and there you go. There's the man. Oh baby, yeah. He comes from another planet and tries to settle conflicts and problems. However, where's that the caterpillars? See this punk? Oh, he's causing problems. Him and his stupid brother. But anyways, so thankfully, now that my kids are older, I am free from the joys of Lunatic. But anyways, there were maybe a few other comments. Max says, how do we verify the identity of the Telegram personal account of someone saying they're Tim Kirby? What does Tim... Oh, that's 100% not me. I'm not going to ask about your stupid crypto and stuff. In fact, today is a dark day in the world of crypto. I tried to open up Binance because I found, my friend showed me a way to put money on Steam. So I thought, I have some Bitcoin. Why don't I just liquidate my Bitcoin? And now, I'm going to be able to use Binance in Russia. It's like still technically available, but you have to jump through 5 billion hoops. Like, oh, yeah. And going back to a previous question about do I stream on a regular basis, I'm gonna have to. Guys, one of the things that's killed this channel is most people do it on a really regular basis. And I think I'm gonna have to. But again, I think one of the key things that we have to do is again, let's call this one kind of a day here. But anyways, let's wrap this up. So as you can see, to my surprise, we're in like the over 20 people watching zone right now, which is actually not that bad. We've had a lot going up to 50 or 60. I think I'm just maybe up too late for the European audience. But anyways, I think that a lot of these programs that I do that are a little bit more long format wind up being more interesting, more of being like a show. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go forward, but there's really no way for me to turn this into like a real show with like a super tight schedule, because I can lie to myself and pretend like I have complete freedom, but I don't. Stuff comes up. We have to go to other places to film it. Guests can't always work at a convenient time, which works out to be evening in Moscow. Because, evening in Moscow tends to be daytime in America, which means they essentially have to be someone who works from home, or someone who's very available during the day, and that just doesn't work. That just, that doesn't work. So anyways, unfortunately, I was hoping to make a more dramatic, sort of, entrance into this, new Tim Kirby Russia format. I'm going to check. Did the chat box, see, nothing's there. Like, I see this thing, the chat that's appearing and going away on the screen. That's supposed to, like, display what's going on. It's just not. Which is weird, because if I was to do, like, the streams I do in Russian, like, over VK and whatever, it works perfectly. So, I don't know what the heck is going on. It's a very, very sad thing. But, anyways. So, we've kind of started Tim Kirby Russia 2.0, which in fact, I've even considered really changing the name of this because it's become a lot more than me. We're going to see about that. We might have to sort of rebrand even the name. But the show can always remain Tim Kirby Russia. But I think the whole sort of thing that we're doing here has to maybe have a more inclusive name, because there's been some really cool people who have been helping me out over the year or years that this has been going on, and it's about time that they maybe get some more recognition. So anyways, guys, it was nice being with you. I guess it's going to be Tim Kirby Russia here, signing out. All the best, and I hope you enjoyed what we did today, because this format is what we're going to be doing in the near future. So me answering one big question, then some Q&A, and then signing out. And anyway, speaking of signing out, let's do that now.